Sinkholes occur where limestone is at or near the surface of the earth. Welcome back, everyone. That was week 2 of our full-time trip. We stayed in a small, privately owned campground near Mayo, Florida.
So the campground was so-so, but the area was the real highlight for us, and it was why we picked that campground in the first place. So this area is surrounded by freshwater springs, which are really beautiful. You saw them in the video clips. Really fun to swim in. They're safe because there's no gators. And we ended up hitting like 5 different springs over the course of the week while we were there, so we were pretty busy. So we had our first experience with cold weather so far with this camper. It got down to 27 and 28 degrees on a couple of the nights. So we had to figure things out in terms of like balancing using the propane heat versus if you use the electric heaters, that can save some money with the propane, but you want the propane to come on if it's below freezing so all your pipes don't freeze. So that was interesting, and we got a few nights of not so great sleep trying to get that figured out.
The kids are continuing to have a blast on this trip. They had so much fun at the springs, just playing in the mud and the sand and playing in the water. It was warm enough a couple days we actually got to swim. One day, Audrey, on the way home from one of the springs, she spontaneously, just on her own, told us how much she is loving living in the camper so far.
That was really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Another highlight of the trip, when we were at Royal Blue Springs, Audrey got to see a young woman who showed up and was trying to overcome her fear of water by jumping off of the platform they have. And it took her a while to do it, and she jumped off. And so Audrey came up and was really inspired by that and decided, I want to jump off of it too. So we weren't too sure. And then another family showed up, all started jumping off with young kids. So then she really got her courage up and she went for it. And we were really proud of her because it was a pretty big jump, and she went for it.
Yeah, that was an exciting day for her. She felt really proud of herself the rest of the day.
So I'm going to do a quick run through of all the springs that we went and saw. The first one was Royal Blue Springs. It was really beautiful, just a circular spring. It had a jumping platform that was about 10-15 feet high, so it was pretty fun to jump off of. The second one was called Lafayette Springs, and that one was also pretty nice. We didn't swim because it was too cold that day, but that one had a nice hiking trail, and the area down by the springs was really fun to hang out at. The next one we went to was Troy Springs, which that was the one where the stairway was being worked on, and so we couldn't really get down to the water. But that had a decent hike at it too. Next one we went to was Little River Springs. That one was also really beautiful. That was the one with sort of the long underwater footage. And there's an underwater cave there. Funny story, while we were there's a scuba diver who came down, and I tried chatting with him, and he seemed, you know, really serious, kind of cranky almost. So I just kind of like stopped talking to him. A little kid was talking to him later though, and asks him, how deep is that cave under there? And he says it goes back 1,200 feet. Not deep, but 1,200 feet in. And then he says a couple minutes later, he's going into that cave solo. So then I realized this guy's not cranky. This is a wild man. He's going in a cave 1,200 feet in, solo, with nobody with him. Obviously no way of like getting help if he needs it. And in fact, when we left like a half hour later, he still hadn't come back out. So I hope he made it out okay. So we forgot to mention Ichetucknee Springs, which is funny because this is the freshwater spring that we planned the whole trip around. It was another really beautiful spot. There's two options there. There's something called the Blue Hole, which is just a circular spring, and then there's the other spring where you saw us swimming. All right, so lessons learned on this trip. Cold weather lessons. First off, if it's not going to get below freezing, use an electric heater. They're perfectly safe nowadays. They have all kinds of features, so if they tip over, they turn off. That'll save you money on propane. If it's going to get below freezing, you have to use the propane fueled furnace so that it heats the underbelly and the water pipes and all that.
Another thing we realized this past week was being in a secluded area with like a smaller town surrounding you made it a little bit harder to find groceries. We cook all our own food. We like to buy, you know, good produce and things like that. So it made it hard for us to find like our staple foods that we eat all the time.
Yeah.
And things were actually a lot more expensive, I think, just because it was in a smaller town and there was no other store to go to.
Sometimes you're kind of restricted to shopping at like these little quickie mart types of things. Mm-hmm. There's this term I've heard, like food deserts, and it's like a very real thing. There's towns and areas where there's just no access to like a wide variety of foods.
Yeah.
So you end up having to pay more or drive a long time.
So that was week 2. It was a great time. We did lots of swimming, lots of hiking.
We're currently at our 3rd stop right now. We're absolutely loving it. We're thrilled about the campground that we're at. So check back in a week for the next video, and of course, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button, and then you can follow us on the rest of the journey. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.